Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up, which is kind of exciting but also a little scary that we're already at this point. It is feeling so quick and yet at times so aggressively long, but I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. And that really paid off for my February reading because I was able to read a ton of books. If you've watched any of my stat videos for the past couple years, you would know that February is my struggle month. It's the month where I just end up not reading anything. I think that's in part due to all the videos that I have to make in January and just being a little bit tired from that. But I don't know what it was. I exceeded not only my January reading, but I just exceeded all of my February reading if you combine them together, I think. And I was just able to read a lot of books. I was able to read 10 books, which I'm just feeling very impressed by again. I broke my February curse. So without further ado, let us discuss what I read this month. We're gonna start out with the manga, and I read Yona of the Dawn Volume 43 by Misaho Kusanagi. This is one of my series that I've continued to read for the past like 10 years at this point. It's been a long time, but this is a shoujo title, which means it's geared towards girls aged 12 to 18, and this is a fantasy series, historical fiction fantasy series, and it's just so excellently crafted. It's remained my favorite for a very long time, and I continue to love and collect it. And the other volume I read was March Comes In Like a Lion Volume 3. Like the last couple volumes, this is so beautifully published with just beautiful spreads, beautiful end pages. It's actually the first time I'm reading this series, but it's been one of my favorite anime series for a really long time. So to get the print version of the story and read it is really exciting, and it just holds up so well. This is a contemporary story. It's technically geared towards adults, but it's following a young 17-year-old Rei Kiriyama who has been orphaned by his parents at a young age and has been living under a chess master and has become a chess master himself. It's not chess, it's shogi, which is a Chinese/Japanese form of chess. And a lot of this series is just following Rei and his tumultuous relationships and past traumas, but it's also following him interacting with this family of young women and just kind of finding this found family in them, and it's so excellently crafted. One of my favorite series, and I'm so excited to collect it because again, it is a very beautifully done edition. No matter the problems that this company seems to have with printing, they do an excellent job when they are able to get their stuff printed. So the other thing that I've implemented over the past month is I'm making these extremely little tiny, will it focus? These little versions of my books. I bought one of those little book nook kits. I'll insert a picture here. In the book kit, you obviously have all the tiny little books and stacks of books that you have in your set, and I wanted to customize the set. And so every time I read a book, I'm taking one of these tiny little things and making it with the cover of the book that I've read for the month, and then at the end of the month, I can stick it on the shelf. So eventually the whole thing is going to be full of my own reading, which I think is really fun, especially because a way to collect books when I'm not necessarily deciding to collect the physical copy. So yeah, I have both of those manga as little mini books. And what's really cute is I have like a little TBR jar of my books so that I can scoop in there and pick out which one I'm going to read. But yeah, if I'm looking down a lot, I'm looking at my cute little books and pulling them out and remembering what I read. But now with the manga done, let's get into the books that I read this month. And I'm going to start with my least favorite book and make my way up to my favorite books. I said at the beginning of the video that I read 10 books. One of them I'm not going to talk about. I'm just saying, I read 10 books. The first one I'm not going to discuss. So let's get into my least favorite book of the month. Unfortunately, is going to be The Atlas Complex by Olivia Blake. And this is the third and final installment in the Atlas 6 series. I'm thinking of doing a kind of review discussion of the Atlas 6 because I feel very weird about it. So the Atlas 6 is an adult fantasy series. I believe it was originally one book, I want to say. It was picked up by publishers and it became a traditionally published work, and it was extended into 3 books. This last book came out not last year, but the year before, I believe in 2023, maybe early 2024, but I believe 2023. And I know it disappointed a lot of people. I wouldn't say I was disappointed by it. It just had a lot of the same problems that I noticed in the first 2 books in the series, mainly being that it feels like nothing happens. And in a lot of respects, I don't feel like there is a really concise plot going on. If you ask me what character motivations were for the Atlas 6, what the plot of the book is, I feel like I could write something out because we are so immersed in the characters' like stream of conscious thoughts. It really feels really groundless. Like it just feels very unsteady the way that you're reading. So it tends to feel like there's no plot happening. We get like so wrapped up in characters' heads that even their motivations seem to like fall flat and not push them forward. And so the reason why the third book didn't work for me in particular is if you look back at the first book, it feels like the characters really haven't moved or changed or progressed from when we were first introduced to them. It really doesn't feel like there was a lot of character movement and growth. And honestly, I feel like this series could have just been one book. I feel like it would have been a lot more concise. It would have been a lot more palatable. Because here's the thing, when I started reading the Atlas Complex, I was like, why did I hate this second book again? Why don't I have good feelings about this series? Because I love being with these characters. I love being in their heads. I think they're interesting. And as I got further and further into the book, as the longer it dragged on, I was like, oh yes, it feels like nothing's happening. It feels like we're in this plotless realm. The characters aren't really doing anything. The characters aren't moving forward. And that's just really unfortunate. It just felt very much like I'm just like floating around with the characters and just like, again, nothing is happening, nothing's going on. And so I ended up giving this a 2-star, maybe 2.5, because again, I enjoy the characters' stream of consciousness, but if there was a little more plot beats, a little bit more concise stuff going on, I feel like it would really ground those characters in precise moments, and it wouldn't feel like I'm just getting like washed with like characters' stream of conscious without any kind of movement. As for any spoiler beats, I have one spoiler. I'm not necessarily mad at who ended up passing away and like the person that killed him and everything. I feel like it made sense. But I will say it is very interesting that the only like actual gay couple, the only two people that got together, it's kind of interesting that that one is the one that got killed, you know? Out of everybody, I'm just like, really? This series is just like a 2-star series. I think Olivia Blake has interesting writing, interesting concepts, but she just doesn't quite know how to ground them in a story and kind of know when to break away from the stream of consciousness. So the next book I have is another concluding book in a series, and that is going to be The Midwinter Witch by Molly Knox Ostertag. So this is the third and final book in this series. This is a middle grade paranormal fantasy series, and this is about Aster, our main character. But in his family, boys with magic become shapeshifters and only girls can become witches, so that starts some family turmoil, and he interacts with other witches and makes new friends. I thought the first 2 books in this series were really excellent, and I really like how it connected back to Aster's family. This third and final book took a little bit more focus on Aster's friend Ariel from the second book, and it was cute. It was fun, but this ended up being a 3-star for me just because I felt like the moment of conflict was a little bit rushed and just didn't really come out to its full potential. So I like the first 2 books in the series just a little bit more than this. I gave them both 4 stars, I believe. So again, this was cute. It just wasn't quite as good as the other 2 books in the series for me personally, but I would highly recommend this. It's a really cute middle grade series. The next book I have is Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear by Shauna McGuire. This is the, I want to say ninth installment in the Every Heart Doorway series, and this follows one of the characters that we've seen previously in the series. It's her Portal World story. Nadia is an adoptee from Russia, and she was born with only one arm, and it is a little bit of her adoption process and how she fits into that family, and then it is her discovering this world of turtles. And I just felt like the time spent in the turtle world could have been a little bit more fleshed out. I felt like her story could have been a little bit more realized. It just felt we kind of drifted along and things just kind of happened really quickly, I want to say, or I don't know, I just needed more moments grounded in scene. I felt like the book is pretty short and it just kind of glosses over a lot of things. So this ended up being like a 3.5 star for me. It's not my least favorite in the series. It's not my favorite. It's kind of joined that middle realm of books that I felt like didn't quite realize their full potential. I need to go back and reread the series, but it seems like, at least for me personally, the Jack and Jill books tend to be the best. And there's a couple outliers in there as well that I really enjoyed. I would say this is better than the Grass one. There's like one about horses. I felt like this was better than that, but it's still like, it's definitely in the middle realm of I enjoyed this. It was fine. It didn't quite have the oomph that some of the other ones have. The next book I have on my list is one that I have not bought physically. This is me trying to utilize my library more to try and test out books to see if I want to buy them. And so for that, I have The Late Americans by Brandon Taylor. This is a literary fiction novel, and it's really interesting because in a lot of ways it almost functions like a short story collection. It is set in Iowa, mostly around these MFA students Some of them are in the dance program, some of them are in the poetry program, but we also have some people that are just a part of the town that kind of cross paths with these characters. Some of them that are in this friend group, some of them that are not. There's a couple characters that I believe have multiple sections for them, multiple chapters dedicated to them, but for the most part, it's like every single chapter is a short story following a different character's perspective. And I really enjoyed this. I haven't read like a standard literary fiction like this in a really long time. As someone who did an MFA, I could relate to a lot of the things that the characters were thinking and feeling. And again, I haven't read literary fiction in a bit, kind of been tired again from my MFA program and haven't been reading that genre. And so going back and reading it now, I was like picking up on just so many things that I really enjoyed. I really liked Brandon Taylor's writing. He has just such an eye for very catching visuals and like being able to tie it into the characters and like what they're feeling and thinking. Like just very beautiful poetic moments where he has a character notice something and like see it in a very specific way. All these stories kind of like end open-ended. There's a similar feel to them, coming to similar sentiments about life, but they're also kind of vignettes where things are like left open-ended. So there was a lot I really enjoyed about this. I want to say it was like a 3.75 for me. It wasn't quite a 4-star read, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be picking it up and buying it. Just, I really enjoyed it. It's kind of a lot of like despicable, unlikable characters. It's a lot about being queer in the Midwest and being in these MFA programs. Overall, I would say it was a really enjoyable reading process. I mean, it was a lot of like horrible things happening to these people, but I think that like the craft was really good and the characters were really well done. And I need to go back to literary fiction a little bit more is what I'm realizing, because I'm not quite sure where to put this. Could be a 4-star, it could be lower, but I'm feeling pretty good with like a 3.75 as of now. And yeah, I need to go back and read his first novel because again, I love his writing, so I'm interested in what else he has. But moving on to my next read, this is almost in the 4-star category, and that is going to be The River Has Roots by Alma El Mohtar. Mohtar co-wrote one of my favorite books, which is This Is How You Lose the Time War, and this I believe is their first standalone book. They've written a lot of short stories, and so this is them venturing on their own to write a novella. It's not quite a novel. Honestly, it's not quite a novella. It's very, very short. It looks like decently sized or just standard novella size, but there is a short story at the back of this. And so when you take that out, it gets even shorter back here. Barely 100 pages. And since I have an arc of it, there's actually pages missing where art would be. I've since seen the art in the book and it's kind of a woodcut style, which makes sense because this is basically a fairy tale. So this novella has 2 sisters. It's a very short, I don't want to get too into it because I feel like I would just give everything away, but it's 2 sisters. They live in a magical version of our world in the past. I want to say 1800s. They have this singing ability where they can basically interact with this magical water that runs by their house. One of them is more drawn to the mundane world and one of them is more drawn to the magical world, and it's them interacting with those pieces. I enjoyed this. Again, it wasn't quite a 4-star. I'm like in between a 3.75 for this and a 4-star because I like this. I like her writing. I like the story even without the art. It was just a beautiful story. I felt like it could have maybe been a little bit more fleshed out, a little bit longer. It's hard because it is going into that kind of storytelling folklore kind of vibe, so I don't know how much longer it could be. I think I just like this author's writing, and so I just really want a full-length novel from them. But this did satiate me for now at least. I don't know if I'll buy a full copy of this, but I do want to discuss it in the future, perhaps a review of it to come. The next book I have is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marksey. This is the first book in a, I want to call it romantasy trilogy. It's right on the cusp between fantasy and romantasy, I would say, but this is shelved in the fantasy category, so let's just say it's a fantasy. But this is an adult fantasy novel with a historical fiction, paranormal fantasy vibe to it. This is set in Edwardian England, just at the turn of the century, and we have Robert Blythe, who is inheriting his parents' baron? I believe he's becoming a baron, but he's inheriting that title after his parents have suddenly passed away. But unfortunately, his parents have kind of squandered their inheritance, and so to protect himself and his sister, he takes on this job out of nowhere. And it very obviously is a mistake that he was placed in this position because he is now interacting with the world of magic that is existing under the surface of London, and he's had no idea about it this entire time. And so Robert is becoming like co-workers, accomplices with this young man named Edwin, who promises to help him out of the world of of magic and to get this whole situation fixed, because Edwin is just very by the books kind of a guy, very like strict and stringent. I really enjoyed this. It was just so much fun. Again, it definitely leans pretty heavily into the romance aspect of the book, so if that's what you're looking for, I think you would really enjoy this. But there's enough mystery and plot, magical world building to kind of make the story a little bit more well-rounded. I will say I read this as an audiobook. The word cock is just a little bit too much in this book to me personally. As someone that reads fan fiction, I felt like that word was overused here. And I mentioned the audiobook portion because the way that the author said it, like, just with such emphasis, like every time it came up I started laughing because it was just funny to me because I'm 12. So I will say, if you don't like explicit sex scenes, like, you could probably skip over them in this book. I don't think they're consequential, but they're in here, just to be warned. For me personally, if I was rereading this book, I would probably skip them just because I didn't feel like I needed it. I really liked their yearning and pining and their relationship, and I don't know, I just wasn't really in the mood to read sex scenes, I guess, which sometimes happens. They weren't badly written. I was just like, don't care. They're cute, you know, I don't necessarily feel the need to read these explicit scenes. I just really like their dynamic. They got a grumpy sunshine thing going on. They have like a jock book nerd thing going on. Both of their perspectives were interesting to follow. The mystery, the world building, it wasn't like completely fleshed out, especially the mystery I felt like was a little bit lacking. But honestly, like, again, I was enjoying their relationship. I was enjoying their dynamic. I don't think it hindered the story in any way. I felt like the plot beats worked. Everything was just well done. I felt like the writing was good as well. This was just really solid, and I'm so excited to read the rest of this series, especially because I kind of look ahead and I know which characters we're getting for the next two books, and there's just like a really bitchy character coming up in the third one, which I'm really excited for, as well as the second book is a sapphic book, so I'm just so excited for that. And things are wrapped up, but there's a little bit of mystery left at the end of this book, so I'm excited to see that story get fleshed out and progressed in the future books too. But to finish off with my favorite book of this month, this is only going to be a 4-star, unfortunately, but it definitely is my favorite, and that is going to be Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. This is the 4th book in the Murderbot Diaries, and this is the one that I sat down and decided to physically read, and I'm so glad I did because I really enjoyed it. And just letting myself be immersed with this was just really the way to go with this series. If you don't know, Murderbot Diaries is about Murderbot, and they are this sentient protection security AI bot who has basically rigged their programming at the beginning of the first book so that they can watch TV dramas, of all things. They really don't like humans. They don't like having to interact with them. It's just very awkward all around. They would just rather deal with people in a soap opera setting. So throughout this series, it's Murderbot just being like kind of grumpy and dealing with some internal traumas and just like finding friends and finding found family and just like really trying to push them away and just not deal with it. But there's also this bigger plot going on, evil capitalistic corporation that's trying to stop Murderbot and also trying to make sure that they don't reveal certain schemes that they have going on. And I love Murderbot so much. I just love their internal workings and their mind and just how they think. Relate to them a lot. I just really like them. And again, I'm really glad that I sat down and read this book. It's the strongest in the series so far to me. We get to see some familiar faces, and it really feels like the plot is starting to open up to a bigger thing that is going to be happening. I love Murderbot. I can't wait to see where they go from here, and I'm excited to keep reading this series. But yes, those are the 10 books that I read in the month of February. So for the month of February, I was able to continue some series: Murderbot, the Every Heart a Doorway series, my manga series. I did start a new series, so I have 2 more books to read, but I also was able to complete 2 series. I finished the Midwinter Witch series, as well as finishing up the Atlas 6 series, and the Atlas 6 was on my top 5 series to read this year, so I've already completed one of them. Yay me. All of these books that I read were books on my physical TBR, so I've already been able to check off 8 books, I believe, on my physical TBR this month, just where I want to be. And so yeah, I was able to stick to my goals, stick to my plans, and I'm excited to continue that into the next month, so stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.